Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to part 2 of the episode where we are discussing the emergence of New Bharat and what it means for marketeers. A small recap on our premise. It would be the understatement of the year or the decade to say that the marketplace has been well and truly disrupted. So has the marketeer's life and work. Somewhere between India and Bharat, a new world order has emerged. It's not a different India. It's not a different Bharat. It's just a different marketplace. It's younger. It's more affluent, it's more aspirational, more willing to spend, and it's embraced technology. On that note, to discuss and talk about this more democratic marketplace with more access, more information, I'd like to invite my next guest, Ruchira.
Thank you.
Ruchira is the Chief Marketing Officer, India and APAC for HMD Global, the House of Nokia. Ruchira has worked with global majors like Unilever, PepsiCo and DSM. At DSM, she led a B2C startup business with a portfolio of need-based food and beverage solutions to combat the challenge of malnutrition. Congrats on that. At PepsiCo, she worked across the portfolio, created award-winning campaigns such as Crash the IPL and Lay's World Cup. And now she's bringing back a much-loved brand to our lives, Nokia. Welcome to Brand Studio Live. It's been a fascinating career. You've seen the marketplace at very close quarters, and especially in your last assignment. Draw us a picture, give us some key insights of the New Bharat, start us off for part 2 of this fantastic episode.
Yeah, thanks for having me here. When you say an interesting career, it goes back to days when, getting your spot and competing with 5 other brands in Unilever to get your spot on Doordarshan was like the moment you'd made it, right? I mean, to be on that Sunday evening film, etc.
I remember that, yes.
And if you look at it, the evolution and the disruption is to the quantum where today India is mobile first. And that's not an understatement. It's mobile first because not only are people using mobiles now for their communication, for business, which is what maybe some brands talked about earlier, it's becoming that vehicle of choice ahead of screens. So, and when you look at what it's going to do to us as a society and in India, it can be the disruption, if you ask me, is yet to come. Because you're going from marketing to many to talking to one on their terms, right? Think about it, as an Indian, today we still love the fact that I have my own profile on Netflix and it says, because you watch this, we're going to recommend XYZ. I love it. And that's different from what my mom's going to watch. And we're all on the same TV technically, we're all on that same channel, that single subscription. But I've got my own profile and I love it, right? It is disruptive because of the way choices will be made on brands and businesses. So I think there is a huge disruption coming in the way mobiles are going to disrupt the way consumption happens in a household, right? The second thing that hits me constantly is, and like you alluded to my last stint where I was traveling to a lot of villages, I was meeting women in self-help groups. So you'd meet the sarpanch first, and then you'd walk away to these women in a self-help group and say, what would you think about selling products for nutrition and, very, very low-cost products? And they'd say, yeah. And we'd say, when you make rice, etc. So what do you cook? And someone would say, Shahi Paneer. And you're like, really? And this is a small village, small 2,000 population village in UP. And I used to go there, by the way, in Hindustan, and believe me, things are very, very different. And you'd ask them and say, but why? And how? And they'd say, oh, YouTube. And you'd say, really? And they'd say, yeah, because, and you say, but where's the signal? Wo ghar, uske chhat pe, us wale kone mein. So in that corner of that terrace is where you get the signal. Go there, you'll be able to download your videos. We download it. So these guys do what they do. But later at night, when they come back, we take the phone and we go up and we're consuming the content and the media of our choice. Now, that's really important because not only are you consuming the content of your choice, but that device is becoming your passport. And I mean your passport to the world. And it's empowering people who were never empowered earlier. And what's also accelerating this trend is e-commerce. Most people look at e-commerce as a supply chain, as a way to get your products there. I look at e-commerce as a way where it creates experiences in places that you're least going to expect it. So the disruption that happened from landlines to mobiles, I think the consumption disruption is something we're experiencing today. The last one, which for me personally is giving me a lot of energy in a lot of ways, is the fact that in all of this, there's a lot of information that's going through, right? How do you self-select? Because I'm on my device, I have to self-select and I have to make a decision, because Indians are still driven by value proposition and value for money. They're not going to put their money behind something that's just nice. I mean, we're not there yet. And we've, by the way, been bitten. You know, if you look at the number of brands who are pulling out from some e-commerce portals, it's happening because there is a deficit on trust. You know, I don't know whether what I'm going to get at home is the right color, shape, size, whatever, brand, and it's happened to me. I ordered something, it was purple, what I got was white. I mean, there wasn't even a shadow of doubt that it was the same thing, right? In that, the role of a brand and its ability to build trust, therefore, pretty much across the spectrum, to every little nook and cranny where you're relevant, is the most exciting thing that could have happened to brands yet again. So it's a really exciting time. In all of this, to your point, what is New Bharat? I have no clue. It's all nice nomenclature. It just means that Indian consumers are coming of age. And when they're doing it in unabashed, self-confident terms, where they're on equal footing with businesses and brands, and that's brilliant. I mean, I think that's great. It also means entrepreneurs. It also means new businesses. If you're delivering the right value proposition in the right way, you have as much of an opportunity to flourish as that big established big brand business. So yeah, exciting times. I can go on forever.
No, but you know, so many things that you said, and I'm just ticking off stuff, right? There's clearly more affluence, there's more empowered customers, there's deeper penetration, there's a more democratic marketplace because there's more access to both information and to, you know, and to goods and services. And also the whole trust piece, and trust comes in so many dimensions, including reliability.
Yep.
It sounds like
sounds very boring.
It sounds like the perfect recipe actually for what you're doing now, which is the brand Nokia.
You know, I don't think the brand ever went anywhere, right? So yeah, sure, we're available. We're online, we're offline. You know, we're available for everyone across a range of price points that few other brands, maybe very, very few other brands are available at. So I think Nokia continues to deliver to its promise in a world that is, and we happen to be, by the way, in a very exciting industry in a very exciting country. India continues to lead growth globally also on smart devices. India's also still got huge penetration headroom. India will have to be many Indias at one point, at any given point in time. So yeah, sure.
Specifically in your case, do you feel that relevance with younger customers who've come into the market of late is a challenge, is a bit of a challenge, or is that a...
So it's interesting. You find a lot of parents giving their kids feature phones. They want to keep them away from the device and the screen. So, but I want you to be safe and secure. And I want to give you the most reliable, the most trustworthy device there is.
Call me, SMS, do no more.
So, you know, yeah. And at best, there'll be a little bit of Facebook or a little bit of WhatsApp. So,
okay, very interesting.
Yeah, and we see that. Equally, I think people are getting more cognizant of screen time. That's a big health and wellness trend as well, as to how much time you're spending on screens, how good is it for you or not. So I think, to your point, there's no straight line anymore.
Questions?
Why do we see a very templatized cookie cutter approach to smartphone advertising? Front shots, back shots, pop-up cameras, one celebrity which is interchangeable. Why do you think that's happening? Is it a conscious effort, or what is it regarding?
Can't comment on that because, I mean, honestly, a lot of it's not us. It's about upgrading a consumer and doing it by talking that language which is the most aspirational, flagship, etc. You know, so the one challenge that I have which I've always urged my teams to do is stop dumbing it down. I remember, and I was guilty of the same thing, by the way. You know, who watches those Balaji serials? You know what? You may not like them, but guess what? They've got something.
I produce them, I know.
They've got something. Yeah. So I think there's just so much happening there. And it's not lowest, it's my interests. And I'm going to consume it. And if I'm paying you for it, you know what? Money talks every single time. So it's exciting. I love it. I mean, I think it's very energizing.
Ruchira, actually, I think Nokia as a brand, all of us have consumed at some point in time. I think I speak for everybody. So when I joined Samsung in 2011, Nokia was the Godzilla of the industry. It was only 8 years ago. And to all of us, the disappearance of Nokia was almost like the death of a beloved relative. Have you found that there is some residual equity for Nokia which is helping you, or you're having to start from scratch?
So we were number
Particularly
2
when
last
it's all
year
feeds and
on the
speeds
most
like
trusted
the
brand
Alexa.
in telecom. Number 2.
Yeah?
Yeah, number 2, 1 year after coming back. I don't think residual equity is gone. I think we're building new equity because we continue to get a lot of new consumers with our large range of phones, which maybe you and I don't see. I think where the battle is, which is in smartphones, it's a very high octane kind of a battle. And, you know, that's where you turn around and think, oh, we're not as ubiquitous. Yeah, sure, but it's only been 2 years. We'll be back.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was a lovely session to start that with. My next guest is the Vice President of Global Sales, Southeast Asia, MENA and Africa for Truecaller. Tejinder Gill is an emerging market specialist with more than 15 years of sales leadership and general management experience in advertising. In the past, he's worked with companies like LinkedIn and Yahoo. Welcome to the show. 150 million app downloads, 100 million daily active users, and in not a lot of time. That's massive numbers that might actually be telling us the story of New Bharat. Tell us, when Truecaller came to India and through your experience, what was the big insight? What was magical about this product that gave it the numbers that we see, and how has it evolved?
Sure, Amit. Thanks for having me here. As you rightly said, we have 100 million daily active users. Imagine the kind of scale we have, right? So it means you have 100 million people who are using us every day and multiple times a day. I think that is where the hook lies. What made us successful in India was we were solving a very basic, simple problem, right? Which was who is calling you. And we wanted to give context to the call, right? So think about it, a call is coming and we mark it as spam. It is up to your decision whether you want to pick up that call or you want to reject it. That helps you a lot in saving, millions of hours, right, every day when you actually use Truecaller. So that has been the core insight for us when we launched the product in India. And to answer your second question, how we have evolved. So again, like when we started in 2009-10, we were primarily known as a caller ID app, right? That was the core value proposition. From there, we have now evolved in last decade or so, where we now want to make communication safe and efficient. Like that is the ecosystem and the space that we want to operate in, right? And we have done a lot on the product side, and we have localized the stuff to India, which has taken the game to the next level. And that is where the entire engagement is driving in the app.
Not many brands can boast of this success with, what is it, zero marketing budget?
Yeah, you are absolutely right. I think we are 100% organic, right? And we have built a brand which is trusted by our users. So it's a product made by the community for the community, right? So if you use Truecaller and if you contribute to the community, it is successful for everyone, right? And that has been the core value proposition for us.
But what can marketers learn from that, from your experience?
I think 3 things that we have focused on all throughout our journey. One is a DAU versus MAU ratio, right? So daily active users versus monthly active users. So monthly, I think a lot of marketers just chase app downloads, right? Which is a great phenomenon. We all go through business pressures to get acquisition. But I think having a healthy DAU versus MAU ratio is super critical, right? And your existing users are more important than your new users, right? That's the first success story. Second, I think what we have done in the company is we look at the new growth engines with 2 different lenses, right? One is actually through data. So we track like 4 billion calls a day. So look at the data that we have every day from Indian consumers. So we look at that data, the trends, and actually the second one is the user feedback, right? Which is super important. So as a leadership team, all of us from the founders to the business heads, we all have access to the user feedback. And the third thing is, I think whenever we launch right into different markets, I think localization becomes the key, right? When we launched in Africa, we realized that 10% of people, who were using our app were Arabic, right? So if you take 10% in absolute, just 10% as a percentage looks low. But if you take that number in absolute numbers, that is probably 10 million users or maybe 20 million users for us, which is a healthy number. And then we adapted the app towards that. For India, for the new Bharat, I must say what we did was, one is we launched the app in 16 different languages. These are kind of product innovations which we have localized basis the consumer feedback.
Interesting. Questions?
In this day and age where data privacy is being talked about, and especially in the West, and the big concern, do you face this kind of skepticism from the new set of consumers, or basically what's your point of view, and how, as an app which has basically access to your contacts, ensure that you're on the right side of it?
Yep. So I think as Truecaller, we are governed by trust and safety, right? Like that's our mission statement, and that's how people believe us. Let's say if you're getting a call from a consumer or any of the users, we tell you who this person is, and you actually really trust us that, yeah, Truecaller is giving you the right information there. I think privacy is of utmost importance for us. And as I said, I think we are an ecosystem which is governed by our users and for the users. So people contribute to the community. Like we as an app just facilitate the technology there. So privacy will always remain the center, the heart of Truecaller, right? And everything on Truecaller is permission based, right? So you can always opt in, opt out of the entire ecosystem and the community.
Brands clearly use Truecaller, and 100 million daily active users. It's a platform which is clearly very, very viable. Talk to us a little bit about what brands are doing to reach this mass of population on Truecaller.
Right, we play a very passive role, right, in the lives of a consumer every day. And as I said, right, like a user gets around 8 to 9 calls in a day, which means brand gets 8 to 9 opportunities to talk to a consumer every day, right? And basis our AI and machine learning algorithms, we help our marketers to target the consumers in a more effective and efficient way. So you can deliver the right kind of a message at the right time to the right audience.
Wonderful. I want to learn more about that.
Absolutely.
But
super.
Offline, thank you so much. It's been wonderful having you here. What a great story.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
My next guest, Shaugata Bagchi, Head Global Content Marketing at Tata Communications Limited, was a digital evangelist before I actually started on my digital journey. So lots I've learned from him. Over the last 17 years, Shaugata has worked with both traditional and new age brands, gathering exposure to diverse customer segments, markets, a wide array of brand building opportunities. Welcome to Brand Studio Live. As a career digital evangelist, how do you see the relationship between marketers and customers change? And I have a feeling it's changing very rapidly as we speak in this very digital mobile first world that we're talking about, the new Bharat. Talk to us about that.
Sure. Thanks, Amit. It's a pleasure to be here. I would just put 2 points to this discussion. One is when I started out, early 2000s and mid 2000s, digital had a very different role to play in the life of marketeers, and I'm not even getting into customers there. Right at those point in time, it was more about building brand footprints on digital. It predominantly translated itself into what we called as hard-coded HTML websites, largely made for desktops. Right from there to a space where, as all the other experts have been talking about, we're talking about AI, we're talking about personalization at scale, we're talking about predictive content and predictive analytics. I think it's been a sea of change over the last 15 years, if I may say so. The other shifting sands in this space has been about the lens with which marketeers have been looking at consumers. Right? There have been days when there were times when cohorts were created basis the website users, whether they were new or they were repeat users. Right? From those days, we entered into spaces where we started creating segments, where we said, okay, from this cohort, which segment of users have actually spent how much time on the website, how many pages have they navigated into, and again, that was a space where we are. And today, again, we're talking about personalization at scale. We're talking about segment of one. So there has been a huge change in the way that we've been looking at the medium, we've been looking at the customers, and we've been looking at the behavior of the customers on the medium.
In your opinion, what's been in this digital landscape, which is now not new and in the last few years has been massive, what's been the biggest shift that has impacted marketers? And you've been on either side of the marketing spectrum.
Right.
What's the biggest shift?
I think it started with the democratization of access to the smartphones and access to data. It's not a new phenomenon, but it took us probably a little longer than it would have taken anywhere else in the world, because as we democratized smartphone access, they were predominantly owned and controlled by the men of the house. right? So women had restricted access to smartphones and data and content at some point in time. But I think over the last few years, with women also coming to the fore, with the spending power increasing, their shifting changes in role in the decision-making journey in the household has also evolved. Now is the time, where they've come to the fore, and the access to smartphones, and as I think Ruchira rightly called it out, it's being their passport to the World Wide Web and to the world of different experiences. That is predominantly driving the change. So that has made them more aware, more sensitive, more discerning, in certain cases more demanding, more clear about what they want from the brands in terms of messages, in terms of products, in terms of solutions, and that's what is driving the change.
As a B2B marketer, how is the world changed? I mean, if the B2C world is different, the B2B world must be different as well. I mean, it's just a natural corollary, right?
Yes and no, I would say. Because yes, there are differences in the rules of the game in B2B versus B2C. That has essentially probably got to do with the fact that a B2B buyer doesn't buy for himself or herself, but they buy for the organization, right? So dynamics at play, the schematics at play are very different, whereas a B2B buyer buys for themselves. Having said that, at the end of the day, the customer is the same person, right? So a B2B buyer who's also a B2C customer is exposed to a very different world of communication and levels of service when he or she is playing in the B2C space. The change that has happened is that they have now they have now started expecting, right, those same levels of service in the B2B world, which has caused a lot of flutters, right? B2B was perceived to be a non-emotional, fact-driven, less interpersonal but more data-driven way of buying and selling, which was pegged on different parameters. Now it's changing. The reason why it's changing is because the emotions of the B2B buyer, because he or she is buying for their organization, are also coming to the fore. They want trust, right? So, do I have a definite answer to you for this question, saying we should probably do this in the changing B2B world? The answer is no. But it's definitely a fast evolving, and people are looking at B2B marketing with a different lens, and which is probably why people like me, spending most of our career in the B2C world, are now being welcomed here in B2B as well.
We can take one question.
How does one meaningfully then engage? Just going back to your days as a content marketer as well. How does one meaningfully engage with content? I mean, where do you even start? What would you define as the rules of engagement, so to speak?
So I think it's a very, very relevant and a very pertinent question, Ruchira. And to me, honestly, it's very simple, right? It's very simple because if content is created to solve the brand's purpose, in today's times, it may not always work. But if the content is created with a clear idea of what we are solutioning for or what we are solving for, it will more or less always work. Because the customer today doesn't want to know what the brand does. They want to know how does the brand solve my problem. And that I think is consistent across whether it is B2C or the B2B world. And that is where, because it is solution first, because it is customer first and not product first, trust starts getting built in. Right? On top of it, you layer credibility stories or success stories of customers who have had good experiences in the past. It just all comes together, in a meaningful fashion and helps deliver the desired outcome.
And we keep learning from Saugata. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ravi.
Lovely having you.
Pleasure. Thank you.
My next guest is Ali Imran, Vice President External Engagement at the Ashoka University. Ali has 27 years of experience in strategy, marketing, branding and advertising. He's worked with brands like Samsung, Bacardi India and UTV Television. He's also worked at Leo Burnett, where I knew him, and Low Lintas. Welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here on the show, and after all of these years, it's wonderful to meet you again. You spent a lifetime in advertising and marketing. Now you represent a very young brand. From the lens that I see it, maybe is a shining example of New Bharat. Is New Bharat really emerging, or is this just a buzzword we've created for the show?
No, absolutely. I think, in fact, that's something the founders understood when they first launched this university. The fact that our education system has not served us well, and I speak as a product of that education system, as are most of the panelists, in the sense that it has not taught us real life skills, it has not taught us how to solve problems. Today's problems are complex, ironically created by our generation, which is all engineers and MBAs produced by the previous system. And the question obviously would have been, does liberal education have a place in the new Bharat, or is it only for the elitist who could have gone abroad to study but chooses to stay in India? We've found that actually the response we are getting from tier 2 and tier 3 cities is almost equal to the response that we're getting from from tier 1 cities. So there's very much a new Bharat. It is aspirational, confident, it wants the best. It wants the best in India, and I think we've been able to meet all those requirements pretty effectively.
Has it become easier to evangelize the concept over the years in a country that's been so obsessed with its engineers, doctors, and now MBAs?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, it's a work in progress. I think all of us, I'm a parent myself, always ask questions about where the kid is going to go, what he's going to do afterwards, etc. But I would say if you take a graph of the last 5 years, then definitely it's become much easier. Parents approach us rather than the other way around. We don't have to explain too much about what's happening because now we've graduated batches and people have gone on to do great things afterwards. So there is proof of concept available, so it's that much easier. Certainly the first couple of batches, there was a lot of selling to be done because nobody even understood what this liberal education is. The word liberal, as you know, has many connotations in India.
And is there a conflict in the house? The young person who's more open to new ideas and...
Not in my house, but yes, there is a conflict. There is a conflict, yes. But I will say this, the tier 2 and tier 3 kids are hungrier than the tier 1 kids about making a difference to their lives and making a difference to their country. And they know that the right education can do that. So they're willing to fight their parents. Many of them come to us for interviews without telling their parents that they've applied. So there is hunger, there is confidence, there is the belief that this is the way to go.
Awesome. Questions?
Considering you are saying that there is a change happening and coming more from tier 2, tier 3 towns, how are you planning to take this forward in terms of opening new facilities for these guys, new locations? How do you plan to take this?
I think...
Add to that.
Yeah.
If you could talk a little bit more about how you're making it accessible to all.
First things first, I don't think we are planning to have many locations. The primary reason being that getting good faculty in multiple locations is going to be the challenge. Good faculty is central to what we are doing. So we are adding on more, we are adding on another campus where we are, and we will continue to operate out of there. The hope is that the message will spread and many other people will open universities like ours. It's already happening and I don't have to name them. As far as the second question is concerned, which is a very fair question, for people from tier 2, tier 3 cities or with language issues or with English not being a first language, we actually run bridge programs which catch them up to speed before they come to the campus, both in terms of skills and in terms of social mobility, so that they don't feel uncomfortable with all these fluent in English from good backgrounds kind of kids.
Sorry, I had one question. From a marketing standpoint, if you look at marketers over here, what difference do you see within the students who are coming from the metros and the students coming from tier 2, tier 3 cities? Is there any difference or they're all similar in terms of interests, behavior? And
in terms of their habits and
their habits, the aspirations they have, anything on those?
So I have to say I feel very qualified to answer this question because in the last 4 years I've personally interviewed 1,000 of them out of the many thousands who apply. I think there are a lot of similarities in terms of the aspiration, in terms of wanting to make it, in terms of wanting to learn more and more. But like I said earlier, tier 2 and tier 3 students are hungrier to learn and to understand more about the world than the tier 1 who are used to getting the best anyway.
At what point will technology actually enable education system in India to get more democratized than what it is today?
Well, I think that's a fair question. The only thing I will say is that MOOC is very common now abroad. Some of the best universities offer their best lectures for free. You can go online and see the professor delivering it. But as far as we are concerned, the issue is that you're not meant to learn only from the professor. You're meant to learn from your classmates, which is why a residential campus is key for our model. But if you want to learn, which many of the coaching institutes are doing, if you want to learn how to solve mathematical questions or do computing, you can do it very much using technology. One professor talking, thousands of people listening. In our model, which involves dialogue, discussion, half the time there's no exam, it doesn't work. And for us, it is important to have a diverse cohort of students who interact with the teacher in the classroom and who interact with each other outside.
Thank you so much, Ali. It's been lovely having you on the show.
Thank you. Thanks.
On that note, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us on this episode of Brand Studio Live, co-hosted by the HT Brand Studio and DMA Asia. A heartfelt thanks to Vatsal Asher for helping with this event. A big round of applause for our brand masters who took out the time to be with us, share their insights and experiences in the newsroom today. Thank you to our radio partner Fever FM who's evangelizing the concept. Stay tuned for our next episode. We'll be back soon.